Okay, so let's just dive right in. What if a new scientific framework claimed to have found a massive, fatal error in our basic understanding of reality? That's what we're exploring today. It's a radical, new model called the Morphean Cosmology Framework. And look, its claims are absolutely huge. It says it can unify everything from physics to ethics, but it also comes with a stark, non-negotiable warning about our immediate future.
And the entire thing is built on this one really challenging idea. The source material argues that when you're faced with a potential crisis, there's no neutral ground. You can't just sit on the sidelines. The very act of ignoring a warning, of not even looking into its claims, that isn't a passive stance. The framework says it's an active choice to just accept the consequences, whatever they might be.
So this idea that inaction is inaction, that takes us right to the heart of the framework's argument. It suggests that the real failure here isn't just about missing a potential solution. No, the real failure is our refusal to even confront the full scale of the problem, including the absolute worst-case scenarios.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because the framework totally reframes our role in all of this. It argues that any complex system, whether it's social or physical, degrades way faster when there's no feedback, no pressure, no resistance. So when we disconnect and say, there's nothing I can do, we're not just stepping aside. According to this model, we're actively removing a firewall. We're becoming part of the mechanism that actually speeds up the decline.
And that brings us to the framework's most urgent claim, the one that centers on our planet's stability. The documents don't just tweak the standard scientific consensus, they throw down a direct challenge, proposing a completely different diagnosis of the problem. So let's compare the two models side by side.
All right, on the left you've got the standard model we all know. Rising CO2 is the main driver, causing a greenhouse effect over a timeline of, say, 120 to 150 years. But on the right you have the Morphean Cosmology Framework, the MCF. It proposes a totally different driver, electromagnetic saturation. Its focus is on something called nanoparticle heating. And the timeline? It's not a century. It's about 15 years. That is a massive, massive difference.
So how does the framework even begin to back this up? Well, it points right to the data. First, it looks at the correlation coefficient, or R value. That's just a number from 0 to 1 that measures how closely two things are related. For the last 125 years, the correlation between CO2 and global temperature has been about 0.87. That's a very, very strong link, and it's the foundation of the standard model.
But then, the MCF documents present this number. They claim that when you measure the correlation between global temperature and the growth of our artificial electromagnetic field infrastructure over that exact same period, the correlation coefficient is 0.975. Statistically speaking, that is a near-perfect match.
So you have to be asking, how could that even be possible? Well, the framework proposes a very specific physical mechanism that just isn't part of our standard climate models. It argues that all these metallic nanoparticles in our atmosphere, from industrial pollution, aviation, and other sources, are now so common that they're basically acting like trillions of tiny antennas, just soaking up energy from our global grid and converting it directly into heat.
But here's the thing. The MCF's claims about the climate, as huge as they are actually just one consequence of a much, much larger theory. The documents describe it as a complete theory of everything, or even an operating system for reality. So what does that even mean? Well, the framework is formally defined as a system that claims to integrate dozens of fields we normally treat as totally separate. But its most audacious claim? That it does all this with, and I'm quoting, 0% paradox. It's proposing that every single piece of the puzzle, from quantum physics all the way to human consciousness, fits together perfectly. And just take a look at this document from the source material. It shows the sheer scope of this thing. It's claiming the successful unification of over 120 distinct domains of knowledge, from general relativity and biology to economics and ethics. Now, just to put that into perspective, Einstein's theory, one of the greatest achievements in human history, it unified just 6 domains. The scale of this claim is just completely unprecedented. So, the crucial point is this. The MCF presents itself as way more than just a theory. It's a whole new foundation. It claims to replace the weird statistical probabilities of modern physics with direct, traceable mechanical causes. It argues that ethics aren't subjective, but are actually a measurable physical property of a system's stability. And ultimately, it offers itself up as a blueprint for building what it calls a Stage 2 civilization.
Okay, but let's bring all that grand theory back down to earth, because all of it is secondary to the framework's most critical and immediate claim.
Because if these models are correct, then everything, absolutely everything, hinges on a single urgent deadline.
The MCF documents lay out a very specific timeline. Right now, we're in what it calls the low-cost intervention window, which it claims closes around 2031. After that, we hit the reversal threshold in 2041, which is described as a point of no return. And 2086 is identified as the absolute physical boundary, the point where the basic conditions for organized human civilization might just no longer exist.
And here is the warning, taken directly from the source material. It's not vague. It explicitly identifies this 15-year window before its proposed EM-driven warming becomes self-sustaining and irreversible, and it projects that inaction could constitute an extinction-level event. Now, it is so critical to understand this part. The documents do not frame this as a prophecy. They present it as a straightforward engineering calculation. The argument they make is that math doesn't ask you to believe that 2 + 2 = 4, it just tells you it does. And in the same way, nature isn't going to ask if we're comfortable with its laws. This is presented as just a statement of mechanical consequence. If the MCF's variables are correct, this timeline is the calculated outcome.
And, as required by the source documents, we have to give attribution. The creator of the Morphean cosmology framework is identified as Christos Soterilis, also known as Morpheus. And the entire body of work is released under a custom public license that allows for study but prohibits any commercial use or modification.
And all of that leaves us with the central dilemma, doesn't it? Obviously, a claim this huge requires rigorous, independent, and urgent scientific testing. But it forces a profound question on all of us. This isn't a request for faith, it is a demand for verification. And it argues that inaction is acceptance. So when a system of mathematics claims to have found a fatal error in our trajectory, what is the truly responsible thing to do?